After the depths of the mind and the heights of ambition, we arrive at the ultimate breaking point. This isn't about who you are, it's about who you become when you're no longer you. Welcome to episode 10. This is the story of Stanley Milgram and Philip Zimbardo, two men who proved that under the right pressure, the line between a saint and a sinner is terrifyingly thin. In 1961, the world was gripped by the trial of Adolf Eichmann, a Nazi bureaucrat who claimed he was just following orders. A young psychologist at Yale named Stanley Milgram wondered, was he lying, or is the human instinct to obey authority more powerful than our own conscience? Milgram set up a simple, brutal experiment. A teacher, the volunteer, was told to give electric shocks to a learner, an actor, every time they got a memory question wrong. The shocks went from a mild 15 volts to a lethal 450 volts, labelled XXX. As the voltage rose, the psychological theatre began. At 150 volts, the learner would shout, "Get me out of here! My heart is bothering me!" At 300 volts, he would scream in agony and refuse to provide any more answers. Eventually, he would go completely silent, mimicking a state of unconsciousness or death. When the teachers looked to the experimenter in the white lab coat, trembling and asking to stop, the experimenter didn't threaten them or offer money. He simply used 4 prods. 1. Please continue. 2. The experiment requires that you continue. 3. It is absolutely essential that you continue. 4. You have no other choice. You must go on. The results horrified the world. 65% of participants delivered the maximum lethal 450-volt shock. These weren't sadists. They were ordinary people who were sweating, stuttering, and biting their lips in visible agony. Yet they kept pressing the button. Milgram proved that when we are under authority, we enter an agentic state. We stop seeing ourselves as independent agents and become tools in someone else's hand. In this state, the individual feels they are no longer responsible for their actions. The authority carries the moral burden. Ten years later, Philip Zimbardo wanted to go deeper. If Milgram showed how we obey, Zimbardo wanted to show how we use power. He turned the basement of the Stanford Psychology building into a mock prison and recruited 24 normal, healthy, middle-class college students. He flipped a coin to decide who would be a guard and who would be a prisoner. The guards were given khaki uniforms, silver-reflecting sunglasses to hide their eyes and create anonymity, and batons. The prisoners were arrested at their homes by real police, handcuffed, stripped naked, and given smocks with ID numbers instead of names. They even had a heavy chain around one ankle to remind them of their lack of freedom. What happened next was a collapse of civilization in miniature. Within 36 hours, the first prisoner had a mental breakdown. The guards didn't just follow a script, they became creative in their cruelty. They forced prisoners to clean toilets with their bare hands, stripped them naked as a form of punishment, and used the whole, solitary confinement, for hours. They organized counts in the middle of the night just to deprive them of sleep. The experiment was supposed to last 2 weeks, but it was shut down after only 6 days. Zimbardo's girlfriend, Christina Maslach, a fellow psychologist, visited the prison and was horrified, telling Zimbardo, "What you are doing to these boys is a terrible thing." Only then did Zimbardo realize he had been sucked into his own role as prison superintendent. He proved that the situation is a powerful drug. Once you put on a mask or a uniform, your old self can vanish and a new situational identity takes over. Zimbardo later called this transformation the Lucifer Effect, referencing how God's favorite angel became the devil. We like to believe that evil comes from bad apples, individuals with dark souls. But social psychology suggests the barrel, the system, matters more than the apple. There are 3 psychological pillars that turn a good person into a monster. 1. Deindividuation. When you hide behind a mask, a uniform, or even a digital screen, your sense of personal morality dissolves. You stop being an individual and become a role. You feel anonymous, and anonymity is a green light for cruelty because you feel you won't be held personally accountable. 2. Dehumanization. This is the most dangerous tool. When you stop calling people by names and start using labels, prisoner 416, enemy, infidel, or illegal, the brain's empathy centers, the mirror neurons, literally shut down. It is psychologically easier to hurt a label than a human being with a face and a story. 3. Diffusion of responsibility. When everyone is doing it, or the system is responsible, the weight of the sin feels lighter. This is the bystander effect on a grand scale. If 100 people are witnessing an atrocity, each person feels only 1% of the guilt. In the world of 2026, these pillars are built into our digital lives. Social media algorithms often encourage us to dehumanize those we disagree with, creating a digital Stanford prison where we are constantly encouraged to be the guard, punishing the other. The most terrifying takeaway from these experiments is that evil doesn't always look like a movie villain with a scarred face or a dark cape. Often, it looks like a person doing their job, following the rules, and refusing to look at the pain they are causing. This is what philosopher Hannah Arendt called the banality of evil. Arendt argued that people like Adolf Eichmann weren't necessarily monsters in their private lives. They were efficient bureaucrats. They focused on the process, how to make the trains run on time, rather than the outcome, where the trains were going. Milgram and Zimbardo showed that our personality is not a solid, unchangeable rock. It is more like a liquid that takes the shape of whatever container we are poured into. If the container is a prison, we become guards or prisoners. If the container is a war, we become soldiers or victims. This suggests that good and evil are not just things we are, but things we do based on where we are. Milgram and Zimbardo took us to the darkest corners of human nature, but they left us with a spark of hope. If the situation can make us monsters, it can also make us heroes. Zimbardo spent his later years teaching the heroic imagination. He argued that just as we can be trained to obey, we can be trained to resist. Being a hero isn't about having superpowers. It's about the simple, lonely act of being the one person who refuses to press the button, the one person who takes off the sunglasses, or the one person who speaks up when the crowd is silent. The question for you is, in the social experiments of your daily life, your office, your school, your social media feed, are you the pilot of your conscience, or are you just following the script? How would you have reacted in that basement? Are you sure? In Chapter 11, we meet a quiet scientist who will show us that the most dangerous prison isn't made of stone walls or cruel guards. It's made of the lies your own mind tells you. Get ready to stop being the victim of your thoughts and start becoming the programmer of your own reality. Don't forget to subscribe as we continue our 12-part journey through the evolution of the human mind. Because to change your life, you must first understand the machine that creates it.